Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sarah Chang with Research America. Thank you so much for joining today's Alliance member call. Before we get started, I wanted to direct your attention for those of you on your computer to take a quick look at your screen for a slide with additional instructions for muting and unmuting your lines. We're using the GoToWebinar platform, and I know each one is a little bit different. So there should be a question box on your computer. Please type in your questions at any time, and then we will take questions at the end of Donna's discussion. For those of you dialing in by phone, we will open up the phone lines as well, and it will be *6 to unmute your line to ask a question. I would now like to introduce our first guest speaker today, Donna Cryer. She's the president and CEO of the Global Liver Institute. Donna will share updates on her organization's comprehensive COVID-19 response program and tell us a little bit about some of the things she's been working on and some new inventive ideas that she's come up with. So Donna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you to Research America for giving me this platform and this time with my fellow members. The Global Liver Institute has been very proud to be a member of Research America for a long time. And I also want to acknowledge how humbled I am to be part of this COVID-19 series of calls to members, given how august the previous speakers were with Doctors Feinberg and Georges Benjamin. So I will try to do my best not to contribute the same amount of value. So when I was approached with this, I really thought what I wanted to share and what I hoped would be helpful for the Research America membership was really the process that I've gone through and that the Global Liver Institute has gone through very rapidly in the past 6 weeks to assess, to anticipate, to pivot, and to stand up an entirely new program, our COVID-19 response program for liver patients. And recognizing that we were going to need to sustain that program, not just for a few weeks, but really into 2021. So over the course of a year now is our thinking for the program. I really want to acknowledge the many Zoom calls that I had with my fellow advocacy organization leaders in the oncology field, in the rare disease field, and so many of the patients that the Global Liver Institute works with through our Advanced Advocacy Academy. It all helped me feel very grounded in that we were constructing things that were reality-based, they were needed, they were actionable for people. And so our intention was to rapidly stand up new types of resources in ways that people could access, both from a language standpoint, translating as much as we could from the evolving medical information, but also being able to really ramp up our use of social media and visual tools, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. And we've reached a really algorithmically larger group of people than we had been in contact with before. So I'll take a step back, though, in terms of how we got to a global COVID-19 response program that is reaching about 30,000 people a week. I am not only the leader of a patient advocacy organization and the leader of a research institute. I'm still the interim executive director for the People-Centered Research Foundation, which has been the central office for PCORNet, PCORI's research network, for the past year. And so when, going back 6 weeks, I had to think through how did I need to respond first as a patient with active conditions. How would I make sure that I could stay well and continue to access care during this pandemic, when I could see that plans for care for high-risk patients like me, who need many different specialists, they were not there yet when we look back 6-8 weeks. I had to think through, as a caregiver for another high-risk family member, what their needs were going to be and what the needs of our household would be. I have an elderly parent that I needed to make sure was safe and will be well served during this time. I need to think about how our office, thankfully we've always been constructed in a way as an organization, because when we first started, we had people in 6 different cities. So at this point, though, the Global Liver Institute does have people in 2 different countries, including Italy, which gave us, advance notice of what this could be like and what we could see in the United States. So we quickly went to remote. That took purchasing of new technologies, upgrading some technologies that we had, and making sure that everybody was equipped to do their job remotely and had everything they needed. So I think thinking through sort of the foundations of what a sustainable delivery of service from a very human-centered place came first. And I think that is the advantage, frankly, of being a patient facing a global health crisis. We're good at this. We have faced our own personal medical crises. I've been suppressed for over 25 years post liver transplant, so I had masks, I had gloves, I had pulsimeters and and various and all the Clorox we could want in the house without hoarding. But having thought through what it really means to navigate work in a landscape being immunocompromised, I think gave us a head start on thinking through what it would mean for first us as a business, and then what types of services our patients would need. So we spent that early period of time in very close, rapid outreach to hepatologists, heads of transplant centers, heads of cancer centers around the country. And in many ways, we realized we were helping them connect. And as they were writing policies and accelerating the sharing of those policies about how they would respond, how they would adapt clinical care guidelines for patients. And so, it was humbling that as the patient organization, we were helping to facilitate the acceleration and sharing of those medical best practices as they were being evolved. And so we continue to provide weekly a medical update, which really is a roundup of sort of the medical and clinical information that comes out of different medical societies, and try to translate that into lay language. We also have set up a COVID-19 line so that I get questions directly from patients and people who may not have a liver disease. Some of them are just simply immunocompromised. We have to realize too that we have people with transplants or rare liver diseases or liver cancer who are not able to stay home safely. They are essential workers. They may even be frontline workers in hospitals and health systems. So what information can we give them, both medical as it's evolving and coming out of the literature, as well as increasingly legal and financial, to be able to help them keep themselves safe and serve their families. So the medical updates we produce weekly with a lot of consultation with physicians groups, medical societies, letting people understand how their access to care will evolve, how the care itself may be redesigned, what they can expect if when they go into the doctor's office, or what they should ask for if they go into the doctor's office if they haven't heard. Since so many procedures for patients have been canceled or delayed without adequate communications in many cases from their centers, there's also policy issues that we've been very involved with. So The first step was our medical updates. The second aspect of what we've been able to provide and been very active on, and we've always been a collaborative organization. It's part of our DNA. I feel very strongly about, that's how we go further in life and certainly in Washington. But I really want to give a shout out to my policy director, because we have been collaborative, in a fashion and at a rate that I never dreamed possible, with different sign-on letters, with changes in congressional legislation, as well as CMS waivers, so waivers in payment and those types of policies. We've looked at guidance from FDA on clinical trial continuity. And so it really is a broad view of policy. Of course, we've been following CDC and the difficulties that they've been having, and trying to discern and match up to true scientific information, and be constructive in our criticisms. And so, but the pace of change has been so fast. And I also want to give CMS so much credit for what they've done to advance telehealth and other ways to support and access and pay for both COVID-19 care and increasingly non-COVID care, which has been very important for us. Things like patients being able to have access of 90-day refills for their prescriptions, and other things to set patients up for success, because there's no pause button on the need for a transplant, or your liver cancer tumor doesn't stop growing just because there's another virus that is very prominent. So we have been very active across federal agencies, and on the Hill, wherever they may be in their districts, or actually in Washington. And so that advocacy component has been very strong for us, and making sure that we are very closely aligned with different cancer organizations, rare disease organizations, and others who are also. So because there, of course, as you all know, if you're on this call and are a Research America member, there is power in strength, there are power in numbers, and in people agreeing that, these are the three things that will really matter to patients and move things forward. And so the last thing I'd like to talk about has been something that's totally new for us. It is our GLI Live. It is a Facebook interview series, now with guests, now with international guests, that we do every week, every Wednesday at noon Eastern Daylight Time. And it has really opened up a much wider viewership for us, a much wider reach for us. It was amazing the first time the analysis came back, and we had 9,000 views of an episode. You now reach 30,000 people in a week after the initial episode has aired, and they're all available on our website. And so we found that we were filling a need. We've been constantly backing this up with surveying people to understand how they are experiencing COVID, as well as doing daily Twitter polls to just get sort of flash information back. And then the calls that I do with our advanced advocacy, our A3 alums, who themselves are leaders of large Facebook communities or smaller grassroots organizations. It's important, I've always felt, if you're going to say that you're a patient advocacy organization, you have to demonstrate how you yourself are patient-centered and really channeling patient insights. And it's insufficient that it's just led by a patient. So certainly, my insights carry some value, but we really strive to be grounded in the patient experience and let that drive what we provide how we provide it, when we provide it. And we really think that we struck a nerve in our GLI Live programming. And it will handle all of these issues that are so important to patients, as they've told us. First, they were about, just what's my risk of contracting, COVID, and what is it? And then it evolved into, well, how do liver patients or immunocompromised patients do if they do contract COVID-19? Are our outcomes worse? Are they better? And so trying to access and provide that information. We've done episodes on coping strategies, because I realized myself that this is a lot, the self-isolation, the added workloads. For those of you who have kids at home, enough said. So coping strategies was something we wanted to put forward with a very experienced oncology social worker as a guest. We've also interviewed guests in the UK to help us understand what that experience has been. We've interviewed transplant hepatologists to tell us what it's like giving care on the line, and have a really exciting lineup that includes talking about clinical trial continuity. So as we think about, how to access care, another important piece that we feel of accessing is, how do you access clinical trials? We are still dependent on research being done, being conducted. We're still dependent on cures and treatments coming out. Certainly in the liver and the hepatology field, in the GI field, there are so many conditions, like the original one I had for an autoimmune type of liver disease that has no cure, that has no treatment, that we're in hope for. And so as patients, and as also as someone who had built a multicultural division for a clinical trial recruitment firm, as a patient advocacy organization, we'd like to see how we can be helpful in working with sponsors on innovative ideas in clinical trial continuity, so that research that benefits patients can continue. A lot of that, just to give you a teaser of the episode, but you'll have to tune in, will be about many of the things I've talked about for a very long time at the National Academies and elsewhere on hybrid trials, mobile clinical trials, spacing out visits, having visits home, giving information in through wearables and other data platforms. But I think that there's a way that we can continue many of the trials at some scale, rather than stop them completely. So we hope to restart those that have started and give a plan forward for others. So those are the main components of GLI's response and our experience as a team and as a family, as we have attempted to navigate this. I look forward to taking any questions and ceding the floor to my other guest speaker.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Donna. Terry, do you have any questions that have come in?
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about what's the role of patient advocates in trials currently underway to test COVID-19 therapies? Is that something you all have dealt with?
Yes. So one of the things, certainly in working with the PCORNet trial, was definitely speaking up for the patient engagement component in that, and the stakeholder engagement, and that trial, which is really exciting about healthcare workers on the front lines, making sure that there was a patient group, a stakeholder group, in that in that instance of nurses and others, was included as part of the protocol and the planning of that trial, was something that I was able to contribute. I think for many of the COVID-19 trials, as they're thinking about eligibility criteria, as they're thinking about outcomes, it is important for patients and patient advocates to have a role in making sure that the questions that we want answered, that eligibility criteria, that data that we want tracked, even data sources that we feel should be accessed, and then outcomes that we would like measured, should be all part of that planning. And so we have been in conversation with several different trials as they've been standing up. We've also contacted there are registries in my field for liver disease. I'm sure there are COVID registries in several different therapeutic areas, and and covering different conditions. And then also I've been involved as an advisor to a project that is identifying and linking different data sources. And I think that project, which more will be available in the next few weeks, would be really helpful to patients, because it would open up, beyond a particular hospital or even beyond an EHR, matching claims data, other types of data, to give a more full picture, particularly as we recognize that there have been people who have been infected and at home with COVID, some recovering, some not. And so what data sources do we need to be able to capture all of that? Do patient registries play a role in that? But certainly the patient perspective on the type of questions we'd want to have answered, so that the type of data sources are included in those projects, is very important, and something that I've been excited to be a part of over these past few weeks.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question that's come in. Tell us more about this Facebook Live. What's it called? How can people find it? When can they look for it?
Yes, so it's called GLI Live, and then the guest changes out the title. So if you just sign on to Facebook, the Global Liver Institute Facebook page, at noon Eastern Daylight Time, we will magically appear. But you can also catch every past episode on the Global Liver Institute, so globalliver.org /COVID-19, and all of the past episodes are there. I'll just tell you my favorites. My favorite too, and I don't know, each time it's my new favorite, but my favorite has been a wonderful conversation with our colleague in Scotland who leads the PBC Foundation, a rare liver disease foundation, and how they're experiencing it. And then, as everybody was being told to wear masks, and I was like, well, where do you get a mask these days? So we invited people, several of the mask makers, so that episode was also interesting. So try them all, see what you like, but join us next Wednesday.
Fantastic. I have another question here. Thank you first of all, for all you're doing to keep patients at the center of care guidelines and best practices. We know you're close to PCORI. Can you talk a little bit about what PCORI's priorities are in this time, and how can advocates help?
Yes, I think, PCORI, the PCORI board has funded not only research, but I would point patient advocates out to the fact that the PCORI board just authorized engagement grants around COVID-19. So if you are interested in helping to share the best practices around, sharing COVID-19 research and the comparative effectiveness of different programs, and patient-centered approaches to these times, I would urge you to look to go to the PCORI website and look at that new funding announcement. I think it just came out a few days ago. Look at the new funding announcement on engagement, but also look at what was funded previously about the PCORNet study that is ongoing. I think it gives a sense of the sort of large scale and scope that PCORNet is possible of. But yes, I've been really excited about how PCORI reacted very, very in a timely fashion, working with NIH and FDA, in fact, to put research dollars on the line and put together a collaboration really quickly. That's already, the study is already enrolling patients. The engagement wards are already people are allowed, eligible to apply. So I really give them a lot of credit.
Great. Ellie, turning it back to you. Ellie or Sarah, that's most of the questions that we have, so just wanted to check on our timing.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I was on mute, of course. Yeah, I guess we probably should stop here, but Donna, we'll probably be getting more questions, and if you don't mind, I'll share them with you.
I'm happy to answer them, as part of this call or afterwards. Yes.
Great, and we'll be tuning in on Wednesdays. You've been just fabulous, as always. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Take care. Leslie, are you with us?
I am here. I am waiting for my webcam to come up, so my apologies for that little bit of delay. There we go.
There you are. Sarah's doing our grand introductions. Sarah, are you with us too?
I am, yes. Thank you, Leslie. We're really glad to have you join us, and thank you again as well, Donna. That was so helpful. Leslie Ritter is the Associate Vice President for Federal Policy at the National MS Society, and Leslie has been working to lead a coalition of health nonprofit community members on an effort to address the need for emergency funding for nonprofit research investment gaps. And we've talked to Leslie a couple of times recently, and so it's great to have you on to talk a little bit more about this this initiative. Leslie?
Oh, thank you, Sarah and Ellie and Terry for first off talking to me again today. But I think this is an issue that most, if not all, groups are really dealing with right now. And Donna could not have set it up any better, because as we're dealing with COVID and we're dealing with the ramifications from COVID in every aspect of daily life, patients still need access to therapies. They still need research to happen, and they still need the research pipeline to work to bring these products to market in a way that is both safe and efficacious. And so one of the things that we have been dealing with at the National MS Society, and I know it's been on the minds of others, is what this post-COVID world looks like from a nonprofit perspective. And really the effort that we have been kind of bringing groups together around is what happens to that research pipeline, because we know that nonprofits and voluntary health organizations and that part of the research community is a vital part of the research pipeline and the drug development pipeline. And while a lot of congressional attention rightly has been on the federally funded research and how to bring that back online, the same is true from the nonprofit perspective. Is most, if not all, of our research is paused right now. Researchers cannot access their labs. People have had to kind of shut down what they were doing and work from home. And bringing that research back online is going to take money, and it's going to take time. And I know a lot of our fellow nonprofits are in the same area where they're offering no cost extensions, or they're trying to do what they can to be supportive. But at the end of the day, it is going to take money to bring these research programs back online. So we are putting together a sign-on letter that groups can sign on to and support, that would ask Congress to provide at least $2 billion in emergency funding that would come to the nonprofit, so the nonprofit could award it to its grantees and really help bring those research programs back online. Because this is directly related to COVID and the pandemic, and we think that this is something that Congress could do here and now to kind of help support the research program and the research pipeline. We know that nonprofits support a large amount of early and mid-career scientists who are building towards those NIH funding pots. And unless they can get those kind of nonprofit funds to build their research portfolio, they're not going to be at a place to be able to apply for an NIH, an R01 from the NIH. And so it's important to recognize, number one, that nonprofit community, research community plays a vital role. Number two, that they are also impacted by this COVID pandemic in ways that are, Donna talked about the needs for patient groups in supporting people when through this COVID pandemic, and that is absolutely right. I think the area that has not been addressed yet is the impact on the research pipeline that these nonprofits support. So, I mean, there will be, in kind of next steps, there will be a sign-on letter that it comes out this afternoon, early this evening, for groups to kind of start supporting around this ask. And then we will kind of work with our congressional champions to build support on the Hill. But if groups do not mind, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, but really the ask is, we think at least $2 billion provided by Congress in an emergency fashion that would allow nonprofits to fulfill grants that have already been planned and kind of scoped out. This would not necessarily apply to new research funding, which is in its own, or research programs, which is its own pot that I think a lot of groups are grappling with. But what is the impact on research broadly in the nonprofit field? This is very specifically on how to get research funded by these nonprofits back online when it is deemed safe to do so. And I'm happy to pause here and take questions if people have questions around this, or if there's more in detail that I can provide.
I thought that was just great, Leslie. I am wondering, do folks have questions about this issue? Are the lines open for folks if folks haven't sent in questions?
Hi, Ellie. This is Anna with Research America. The lines are open. For all our attendees, you may just need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
I do have one question here that's been submitted. Leslie, in the letter, do you propose where the funding should come from? Is there a project specifically?
We do not propose in the letter. That is the next step. We, in conversations with both leadership and congressional champions, it became very apparent that, a lot of offices were not aware that this is a problem. So there is a core group that is really working on where the money would come from, because we know that is the absolute next question that we're going to get asked. What program needs to be, what that would look like. This is really the purpose of this letter, is just to raise awareness about this issue with members, knowing that the Senate's coming back next week, knowing that House members will be looking at this as well, trying to get this as an issue in front of them, and differentiating it from the federally funded research attention that's been paid. Because I think people think research pipeline, they automatically defer to the federally funded research, but letting members know that this is a similar problem, but not necessarily at the agency level. Does that answer the question?
It does. And, Leslie, I just have to give you so much credit, because I do think folks don't realize that research continuity is research continuity. So if you need to accommodate the fact that there have been delays, suspensions, reprogramming of federally funded research, you've got to think about the other funding streams that are also sustaining that research day in and day out that have had to be disrupted. And that, even worse, there's no guarantee that they come back online when things go back to whatever the new normal looks like. Unlike federally funded research, where we are reasonably certain that we'll have flat funding, or hopefully better, for NIH, we don't know what the investment world will necessarily look like. And so this is a real issue in terms of the pace of medical progress for conditions other than COVID-19, and it's so important. So if those of you on the phone haven't been in touch with the group that's looking into this, I think, Leslie, right, we kind of encourage the more the merrier,
Yes.
Definitely join this effort.
Absolutely, the more the merrier. And I think another kind of something that became very apparent to me just in the past, honestly, in the past 24 to 48 hours, was the impact on clinical research that is supported by the nonprofit and the kind of the voluntary health private research that is based around clinical research and clinical trials, and just the impact on those, because we've heard, you know, about the impact of the clinical trial pipeline. Trials are not able to recruit, trials have stalled. So while a lot of it, in my mind, went from the basic science perspective, also from the clinical trial perspective, the groups that are supporting clinical trials really care about and invested a lot of money into those trials. The outcomes of those trials that we talk about, PCORI, what works best, making sure that pipeline is robust. But groups, that is also a significant component that we do address in the sign-on letter that will go out later today. It's not just basic, it is that clinical pipeline that we really need to pay attention to. If the goal is to get novel therapies to patients, patients need those now more than ever. So making sure that the entirety of the research pipeline is supported in future congressional packages.
Great. Terry, are there other questions that have come in?
I just want to check with folks to see if anybody on the phone lines wants to ask a question. People can press *6 if they wish to ask. While we're waiting for that, one other question. Have you heard anything, any special considerations regarding COVID-19 for patients with MS?
I am sorry, in true work from home fashion, my dog was barking. So can you repeat the question?
Yes, completely understand. As I've been on mute trying to feed my dog treats. Are there any special considerations concerning COVID-19 for patients with MS?
Yeah, so that's something that the society, kind of like Donna suggests, very quickly pivoted to. We devoted an entire page on our website to COVID and MS and what people living with or affected by MS needed to know, since people with MS are often in that higher risk factor category because they may be on a disease modifying therapy. So we, on our website, we have an FAQ of the most frequently asked questions that are coming into the society. I am not a medical professional, so I am not going to try to attempt some of those questions, but one of the things that we also have been doing are hosting Ask the Experts webinars with physicians, people who are on the front lines who are equipped to answer those questions. So all of those are online. We've also partnered with Real Talk MS podcast, and I've had a couple of episodes of that podcast directly kind of answering questions or providing more information in detail about what we know. We have also partnered to set up a registry for people affected by MS who have COVID to kind of help track their symptoms and their prognosis and how they're doing. So that will also benefit the research community. But we've kind of been approaching it very similar to what Donna was talking about, from what people need to know to help themselves and their families, and then what information we can provide at an organizational level.
Listen, Leslie, one other question about the draft letter that you have for leadership. Do you want, were you going to be making a few edits before you want us to circulate it for folks to take a look at, or what would be the most useful for you?
Sure, I was waiting on one number that came in. That number has now come in. I'm adding it to the letter, and then we'll send that out to groups hopefully before 4 o'clock today.
Okay.
So it is not out for circulation yet, but it very soon will be. And like you were saying, Ellie, the more the merrier, the more support we can get behind this. I think there is now an attention being paid to what the research needs are, and I think making sure that this community is reflected in the needs assessments will be really critical.
Perfect. Great. Any other questions before we wrap up?
I just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this. I think this is something that impacts a lot of us. So just thank you again, Ellie, Sarah, Terry, Anna, for the ability to kind of come up and talk about it today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's our privilege to have you here. Thank you so much, Leslie. Okay, all. Well, we'll be talking to you soon, Thursday. I think, did Sarah mention that Thursday we have a call with Dr. Collins and with Keith Yamamoto from UCFS and SF, excuse me. And that call is at, Sarah, tell me what time that call is?
Yes, that call is, good question. I have it
We
here.
have so many calls now. 3:15, is that right?
Yes, that is right. That is exactly right. 3:15 on Thursday, 3:15
That's-
Eastern.
Yes, and if you're an Alliance member, please get in touch with us and we'll send you a registration if you haven't gotten access to it already.
You all are
Terrific.
amazing.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye now.